Pipe Cottage. This is Alan Harrelson here with you, and I have a very, very special guest today, Jimmy Akin, who is the lead apologist at Catholic Answers.
Mhm.
Jimmy is well known among an apologist circles, not only in the Catholic world but in the Christian world overall. And he has been a help to me. As many of you know, we were recently confirmed in the Catholic Church in November. And Jimmy was such an instrumental scholar as I was making my way through that transition, trying to better understand Catholicism. And so when Jimmy learned that we were coming into the Catholic Church through one of the Pipe Cottage videos, he graciously sent an email and offered to help answer any further questions I had at that point about the Catholic Church as we were discerning whether to cross the Tiber or not. And so he's become a friend, and he's become such a wonderful staple in my household on the bookshelf as well as in emails. So, Jimmy, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Alan.
Well, we have had several requests. What really it was the impetus for this. I don't know why I didn't do this earlier, but I've had more than a few people who watch the Pipe Cottage ask if I could reach out to you and have you talk more about your pipe smoking journey and just see where the conversation goes. Because a lot of people know you smoke a pipe.
Hmm.
I don't think many people know where that comes from. So, Jimmy, I'm going to just dive right into it. And I'm going to ask a very simple question.
Hmm.
How did you get into pipe smoking? Where did it start for you?
So I was born in the 1960s, and I grew up in the 1970s, and there's sort of a confluence of different factors leading in that direction. Now, of course, pipe smoking was quite common at the time, and I grew up in the Ozarks, which is associated with pipe smoking and popular iconography. I grew up in an academic family, so my father is a professor, and pipe smoking is associated historically with academia. My father happened to be a pipe smoker, and a lot of his friends were. And also, I have a scientific disposition, and pipe smoking is historically associated with science too. So there's just kind of a confluence of different factors.
So you've been smoking a pipe for how long now? Since you were an
Mm,
early young man?
yeah, actually, earlier than than most people might guess. I've actually smoked pipe since I was about 13 years old.
That's good. And so, well, that makes sense. You were raised with a father who smoked
Hmm.
a pipe.
Yeah.
What value does pipe smoking add to your life? What value has it added to your life over the years?
Well, it's a pastime. It's a form of relaxation. It is a contemplative activity. It is one that has aesthetic qualities. There's the aroma of the tobacco, there's the taste of the tobacco, there's the aesthetic of different pipe shapes, there's the warmth of a pipe in one's hand. Um, there's uh, there's a lot of different qualities it has, but generally it's a pleasurable activity that gives one something to do, especially in moments when one doesn't have other things to do. Like I tend not to smoke so much. This may be a bit of an exception since we're actually discussing pipes here. But normally, when I'm talking to people, I'm not smoking my pipe. But when I'm not talking to someone, if I'm just reading and researching or typing or stuff like that, I'll sit at my desk and smoke my pipe and be quite content.
Have you often had people ask you why you smoke a pipe in Catholic circles and Christian circles?
I don't recall getting the why question that much. A lot of people, I really haven't had that question much.
Good, good. So what does the daily routine look like? Do you have a daily routine where you smoke a certain amount of bowls during the day, or you just pick up a pipe whenever the mood strikes?
I don't really count. I don't at present have a schedule.
That's good. Now, I do have a question for you. I notice you have
Hmm.
a couple of pipes on your stand in the background that are
Hmm.
blue. I
Yeah.
have seen those pipes in a couple of your other videos, and
Hmm.
I don't know anything about them.
Oh,
What are
really?
those pipes?
Okay. So these are a kind of pipe that was released. I guess I forget the exact history, but like in the 60s and the 70s. And this brand is called Venturi. Um, but there are other related ones. One of them was just called The Pipe. Another was called The Smoke. But they are not actually briar pipes. They're made out of it. So, as your listeners, many of them I'm sure will know, most pipes that you see are made out of briar root, the root of a briar plant. Um, and there are a few other substances that pipes are sometimes made out of, like the mineral meerschaum. I have a meerschaum back here that you can see behind me.
Mhm.
And I've got a few meerschaums, but most of what I have are briar. And but this kind, the Venturi and the pipe and the smoke, they were not made out of briar. Instead, they're made out of some kind of, I forget exactly what it is, but it's like a carbon graphene compound that is supposed to heat very evenly, and they were then painted in various colors. Since there's no wood grain here to show off like you would with a briar pipe, they were painted in different colors, and blue happened to be one of them. And I remembered these from seeing them when I was younger, and so I went on eBay and got a few of them. And these are
All right,
two of them.
good. Is that a GBD in the background with that clear stem on it?
This one.
Over there on the other side, the other side of that one you picked, that blue one. Yeah, that.
This one. Uh, let's see. I don't. Oh no, this is an Elliot Nachwaller.
Ooh. Now, I'm not familiar with that particular brand. Do you know anything about it?
Yeah, Elliot Nachwaller is a pipe maker who I think is still with us. He's quite famous. He lives in the New England, New York area,
Ah,
and he has a studio called Pipeworks. In fact, it has been based in New York City. I'm not sure if he's still in New York City, but that's where he was when he made this because it's stamped on the stem.
good. Well, that's a beautiful pipe. I love it.
Thank you.
Well, a question that I'm sort of picking your brain, trying to
Hmm.
come up with good answers for questions that I often get from people who watch this channel. And I have gone on record as saying that I am not really in favor of the marijuana culture, recreational marijuana,
Hmm.
and I have received some type of criticism, some degree of criticism from people who are thinking that recreational marijuana and pipe smoking are sort of in the same boat.
Hmm.
I'm not of the opinion that that's the case. Of course, I know that marijuana is used for certain medicinal purposes, but for
Hmm.
recreational purposes, the reason you smoke marijuana and the reason you smoke a pipe are, in my mind, two different things. What's your
Hmm.
thoughts on that?
Well, certainly marijuana consumption, the way it's standardly practiced, has a much more profound impact on cognitive function than pipe smoking does,
Yeah.
or any kind of tobacco smoking does. There are substances in tobacco like nicotine that have some effect, but it's kind of like caffeine. It's a very mild effect, whereas the THC and other substances that are in marijuana have a much more profound impact on cognitive functioning. And so that does raise questions about, I mean, if effectively you smoke a pipe, you're not going to get drunk, but you
Mhm.
smoke a joint, and if you're sensitized to the marijuana, you're going to effectively get drunk.
Yeah.
And so, um, the use of marijuana in a conventional recreational sense crosses over into the ethics of intoxication and things like that.
Mhm. Yeah. I think there are two different cultures going on there. This is one
Hmm.
point that I've tried to bring across is that pipe smoking culture and those people who are involved with recreational marijuana, they're not, in my mind, in the same camp.
Hmm.
Would you disagree with that, or What's your thought?
No, there are cultural differences, obviously, but I mean, you can have someone who both smokes a pipe and smokes marijuana. In fact, you can smoke marijuana in a pipe.
Hmm.
But tobacco smoking and marijuana smoking are fundamentally different animals. They both involve the burning of something and the ingestion of fumes. Although marijuana use can also involve edibles,
Hmm.
but they're two fundamentally different things. Marijuana has much stronger and very different effects on cognitive function than tobacco does.
Do you ever have any? How do you
And I'm
respond?
not a marijuana user, by the way.
No, I have never done it, never tried it, and in my
Oh, no,
my
no, no. I was saying I am not.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Neither one of us are. When so I can't speak from experience. You can't necessarily speak from experience, but I have known people who have gotten involved with this,
Hmm.
and I've seen how it can be disastrous,
Hmm.
particularly and not unlike somebody who becomes an alcoholic.
Yeah.
It can be rather disastrous for family life and for one's personal life. But even if we were to now, I want to get into your particular realm of expertise,
Hmm.
which is apologetics, which is theology.
Hmm.
Um, and again, I hate continuing to harp on what viewers have asked me about, but I'm trying to be sensitive to what people who would be watching this video might be interested in. There are several closet pipe smokers who watch this channel, and I know
Hmm.
that through private emails they've sent. And a lot of these people are either involved in ministry, and usually it's a Protestant ministry, a Southern Baptist church or Methodist church or Pentecostal circles. And they want to enjoy a pipe, but they're not at a point where they want to show pipe smoking publicly to other people.
Hmm.
And that comes from a particular taboo that I was raised with. I mean, I experienced this coming up as a boy too.
Hmm.
Well, in our house, it was completely forbidden to consume alcohol or to use tobacco products of any sort. And I know it wasn't just our household.
Hmm.
That's a phenomenon, particularly in the United States. So, Jimmy, I don't know what the answer to this question is, and I hope to pick your brain. Where does this start historically? What are the origins of this disdain towards pipe smoking or tobacco use in general? And is that simply an American issue?
It's not an exclusively American issue. In terms of its historical origin, I mean, tobacco smoking was something new in the European experience when it first started after contact with Native Americans. And it's interesting to read early accounts of Europeans encountering people who were smoking. I was recently reading one in a book that had a historical section. I have several books on pipe smoking and its history, and in one of them, I was reading an account of a gentleman who had never seen someone smoke before, but he was a British gentleman, and he met this sailor, and he describes an encounter with the sailor where they're at like a pub or something together, and the sailor pulls out a pipe and a pouch of tobacco, which the writer referred to as a wallet, and fills his pipe and starts smoking and explains why he enjoys it and stuff like that. And you have this outsider's perspective who's just fascinated, because he's never seen this before and it's very interesting to him. But whenever anything new is introduced, you have some people who are enthusiastic about it, you have some people who are not enthusiastic about it, because anything new is a change, and changes are always controversial. And it doesn't matter what it is. You can introduce a new technology like iPhones or something, and you get a group of iPhone haters, and people who are like, oh, this social media is ruining everything, we shouldn't be using this new technology. And so anytime there's a change, you have people who don't like it, and that happened with smoking too. And so there were um, various people all the way from its introduction in European society who didn't like it. In fact, in one of the books I've got, it talks about, I forget which, I believe it was one of the British kings, or is at least a high British official, like wanted to ban pipe smoking and really did not like it and wanted to ban it. And he effectively had a public protest where all these guys just showed up at his door and started smoking their pipes and made it clear they weren't going to comply. But over time, it became more accepted in European culture, and it became more accepted in American culture, but not everywhere. One of the things that has been an influence on American history is Puritanism. There was a group of people in England who believed that even after the Protestant Reformation in England, when Henry VIII broke away from the Catholic Church and created the Anglican Church, that they didn't go far enough. That the church was still too Catholic. That it needed to be purified of popish aspects, and this Puritanism then kind of spread to other areas of culture. And so today, if you refer to someone as puritanical or as a Puritan, they're not, people won't associate it with, oh, they're an anti Catholic who thinks we need to eliminate Catholic practices. They're going to think it's someone who doesn't like drinking and smoking and other forms of earthly pleasure. And so there has been a streak of Puritanism in American culture, and that's one of the things that has fueled the opposition to smoking here in America. There have been other factors as well. Uh, I had, and this is something that Christians are prey to, along with non Christians. A lot of the people who are really anti smoking are actually non-Christian, and they have a kind of health hysteria because there is what's sometimes referred to as the cult of the body, and that anything that you do that might possibly cause some level of harm, even if it's not scientifically verified, is something you just got to stay away from. You can't eat meat, you can't eat carbs, you can't eat this or that, and so there's kind of a health hysteria that we have in America right now that's purely secular, that is influencing a lot of opposition to smoking. But there are also, elements in Christianity where things like this happen. I remember once the man who I consciously became a Christian under was a televangelist who had grown up in an Assembly of God church in Oroville, California. And he said there were 13 at the time. This was decades and decades ago, but he said at the time there were 13 Assembly of God churches in Oroville, and that they had all split off from one original Assembly of God church. And they had all split off over different issues, like, can you drink coffee? And one of them said no, and it split off. Can you wear cuffs on your pants? One of them said no, you cannot roll up and make cuffs on your pant legs. Another said you can't wear a tie. And his dad happened to be the pastor of the no tie church. But with religious factionalism over issues like, can you drink coffee? Can you wear cuffs on your pants? Can you wear a tie on your shirt? You're bound to have people who are going to be say, oh, and you can't smoke, and you can't drink, and you can't play cards, and you can't listen to certain types of music, and various other things. So I think it's all part of the same complex.
Well, it's still here. It's still with us now, particularly in the South. And I don't know about other parts of the country, but you're in
Oh, yeah, I just moved from California, and opposition to smoking in Arkansas is nothing compared to opposition to smoking in California.
That's good. So, where are you from originally?
I'm from here in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I was born in Texas, so I'm a native Texan, but I grew up here in Arkansas.
All right. So, just so if people are listening and they enjoy pipe smoking and
Mhm.
that's a part of their life, but they're not to a point where they want that to be public,
Mhm.
and they're in a Christian environment. These
Mhm.
people may actually be in ministry.
Mhm.
What sort of advice would you give to them?
Well, I guess one of the first things I'd say is if, I mean, you're welcome to, if you just want to keep it on the down low and, smoke in private and not really have it be known, well, that's fine. As St. Paul says in Romans, why let your good be evil spoken of? Just because you recognize that something is good and enjoyable and, something you can do to the glory of God, you can do it privately. You don't have to share it publicly. But if you want to, you can. Personally, I'm at a point in my life where I decided I don't care who knows. And so I have part of my pipe collection behind me when people see me in videos. When I'm out in public, I mean, I don't smoke where it's not allowed, but I'll often be smoking before I get there, and then I'll keep my pipe in my mouth when I go to the supermarket or what have you. I even have a pipe holster on my belt, and so if I need to take my pipe out of my mouth, I just stick it on my belt, and people can see it. And I don't care if they like it or don't. I actually get a lot of compliments since I moved back here to Arkansas. I frequently get compliments either on the pipe itself and how it looks or on the smell. I have people reminiscing about, oh yeah, my dad smoked a pipe and it smelled great and it smelled just like that, and I really like that. And so I actually get a lot of compliments. So I would say be aware that you're going to get positive response too. It is not all negative, no matter what media makes it sound like. But then I would also be prepared to answer concerns that people have, because there's a meme in our culture right now that says smoking is really bad for you. Well, excessive cigarette smoking is, because you inhale it. And so it gets into your lungs, it gets into contact with your bloodstream much more. And if you do it a lot, now a few cigarettes aren't going to hurt anybody. This is one of the things that people don't realize. As Paracelsus said, the poison is in the dose.
Yeah.
And so you can have anything and you take it in a small enough quantity, it's not going to hurt you. Uranium, okay, we think of that as dangerous. Small quantity, like in pottery glazes, not going to hurt you. On the other hand, water, we think of water as being really important and some people think they need to drink tons of it a day when there's really not a scientific basis for that. And well, guess what? You drink enough water, you can get water intoxication and you can die. And there have been people who have died from water intoxication. So the poison is in the dose.
Yeah.
Now, because cigarettes are inhaled, you get more of the you get more of the tobacco smoke into your lungs, and if you do that a lot, then you are at a higher health risk. Doesn't mean you're going to get cancer or emphysema. You may, but actually you may not. Lots of people smoke their whole lives, don't have a problem. The statistics on it are not what people think. It's not as dangerous as popularly imagined. When it comes to pipes and cigars, those are not typically inhaled. And so you are not at the same kind of health risk as if you are using cigarettes. And so if someone's a pipe smoker, they should be aware that you're just not at the same health risk. In fact, when the 1963 Surgeon General report on smoking came out, one of the things that, which was the kind of the turning point in American culture regarding cigarette smoking, one of the things it noted in the data was pipe smokers tend to live 2 years longer than non-smokers, and that was just a fact in the data, and they reported it honestly. They didn't try to cover it up. So there may be something to the relaxing effects of pipe smoking that actually may be a net benefit, compared to not smoking. So those are kind of the secular side of concerns that one would want to be prepared to answer questions about. There's also the spiritual side, because you'll hear arguments against smoking in different religious cultures, and this is not an exclusively Catholic Protestant thing. I would say that Catholics, in thinking about this issue, have a benefit in, because Scripture doesn't address smoking tobacco one way or another. Tobacco is a New World plant; it was not known to the ancient Israelites, so there's nothing about it one way or another. But Catholics have a reference point in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which notes that excessive use of tobacco is problematic, but that would imply moderate use is not problematic. And so the question then becomes, what's moderate use? And I would say it's going to depend, among other things, on how you're using it. Like cigarettes, I would say if you want to use cigarettes moderately, that would mean fewer cigarettes compared to the amount of tobacco you could consume if you're using a pipe and you're not inhaling. But from a Catholic perspective, moderate use is actually not a problem in current church teaching. But we do have, in the Protestant community and to some extent in the Catholic community, we have opposition here, either secular or religious, to smoking in general and including pipe smoking. And one of the arguments that's sometimes used religiously is the argument that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, which is something that St. Paul says. And that's quite true. But what are the implications of that? Is smoking inconsistent with your body being a temple? Well, I'd make a couple of points. The first one is even though our body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, that doesn't mean we treat it as if it has to be maintained absolutely pristinely, not taking any risks. Because as the same St. Paul says later on in his correspondence with Timothy, physical discipline, physical exercise has some value, but it's not the highest value. And so, yeah, you want to take reasonable care of your body, but that doesn't mean you never take risks. Just getting in a car is taking a risk, but there are benefits to getting a car and using it to go places. And so you have to, our job as Christians is not to avoid risk in life. You can't do that. If you try to avoid all risk, you're actually going to create new risks because you're going to live under a rock in your house and not ever go out, and that has negative consequences to it. So we have to accept risk. What we're called to do is not avoid risk, but to manage risk, to take reasonable risks for the benefits we receive by taking those risks. You know, anytime you eat food, there's a chance it could be poisoned, but there are benefits to eating food and negative consequences to not. So you just got to take that risk, and you want to take it reasonably. Maybe you don't want to eat the thing that was just in the gutter, but you go to a restaurant that has an A rating from the health department, you're probably okay. Well, so that's one thing I'd say is Saint Paul, who's the your body is a temple guy, also acknowledged that there is value to physical discipline, but it is not the premier value that overrules everything else, and you simply can't avoid risk. The other thing that I would mention is okay, so our body's a temple. You know what's appropriate in temples? Incense. You know what tobacco is? Incense. You know what a
That's
pipe is? It's a censer. And if you can, they had incense in the tabernacle in the Old Testament, in the church or in the temple in the Old Testament. They have it in churches today. If you don't, God clearly has no problem with incense. So God has no problem in principle with tobacco because that's what it is. It's
yeah,
a substance that is burned for pleasure, including aroma, and in this case also taste, but it is a substance that's burned for pleasure. That's what incense is. So as long as you're doing incense in moderation, whether you prefer sandalwood or tobacco or whatever, you're okay with God.
yeah. Well, that's phenomenal. I really think that explanation is going to help a lot of people who have been asking that question. Because you touched on several different points, and we don't have time to cultivate and dig into all of it, but it's food for thought. And so I would also ask, what's your understanding of where the anti-tobacco crusade begins in the United States? You said that 1963 was sort of an important year.
Mm-hmm.
In the 60s, obviously, the heyday of pipe smoking in this country, I would say, is probably the middle of the 20th century. And
Well, in certainly in the 20th century, the middle, it was very prominent.
yes,
But at that point, cigarettes were actually gaining ground. If you
right.
go back into the 19th century, there was lots of pipe smoking. Um, but then after mechanical cigarettes began to be produced, and marketing got behind them because since they're inhaled, they are. I hate to use this term because I have some concerns about the term addictive. I don't think it. I think it's way overused. But cigarettes are easier to habituate oneself to high volumes of consumption
Yes.
because you're getting the nicotine directly into your lungs and into your bloodstream. And that meant that cigarette companies could make a lot of money promoting their product, and they did. And so cigarettes kind of took over progressively and becoming more and more dominant in smoking culture as the 20th century progressed. But there was opposition to smoking, earlier than the 1960s. It was much more accepted. A lot. There was in the 50s. I've heard. I don't know if this is accurate, but I've heard like 90% of people in America smoked. Um, I remember watching an episode of The Addams Family, where which was from the early '60s, where, and of course, Gomez Addams smoked cigars, and his wife Morticia would also smoke, but she would just sit in a chair and smoke would emerge from her body. And I remember watching an episode where they had some visitors to the Addams Family home, and Morticia says to them, "Do you mind if I smoke?" And they say, "Of course not." And she just sits in her chair, and smoke just emerges from her body, and the visitors get freaked out. And afterwards, Morticia is talking to Gomez about it, and she says, "Do you think my smoking offended them?" And Gomez says, "Tish, everybody smokes." But so it was a very normal part of culture at this time. But there had been opposition to it earlier. For example, there was a song that was kind of an abolitionist song. It was also kind of a novelty song, but it was called "Cigarettes, Whiskey, and Wild Wild Women." And so you've got the song expresses opposition to cigarettes, a fire on one end and a fool on the t'other. It expresses opposition to whiskey, and it expresses opposition to wild women. And so you can see how this kind of complex already had a kind of puritanical opposition to it as part of American culture even before the 60s.
Well, that's just entirely fascinating. See, this is the benefit of listening to people who have lived longer than you have. Jimmy, you you are bringing so much to light here that a lot of people are going to enjoy. Well, sir, I don't want the conversation to go too long. I know about the limit that people who watch the Pipe Cottage are really interested in. A lot of people watch this while they're smoking a pipe, and so
Mhm.
about 45 minutes, something like that, they like to be done. But Jimmy, I do want to ask you a couple other less serious questions. Do you have any favorite kind of tobacco that you enjoy? Do you have a go-to, or what sorts of blends do you enjoy regularly?
Well, I have a couple of go-tos. One of them is it's basically the same thing. It's the professional level of Captain Black. So Captain Black is a tobacco that came out in the 1970s, and it became the most popular kind of drugstore kind of pipe tobacco here in the U.S.
Yeah.
And it has a kind of darker, earthier, more chocolatey kind of aroma, if I can put it that way, and without being full on, chocolate. And you can get it in, or could, in dime stores and, drugstores, places like that. But in order to package it, they have to put it in, these paper wrappers and stuff and plastic, and they've got to load it full of preservatives
Yeah.
so it'll stay usable for months because they don't know when it's going to sell. And so it's got loads of preservatives in it, and also, frankly, it doesn't stay fresh all that great if it's sitting on the shelf for months and months and months and months.
Yeah.
But there is a professional grade version of the same thing that one can get in pipe shops. I'm not. It's probably under different names in different shops here locally. There's a shop where I get it where it's called Rustin's Retreat. But if you go to a pipe shop and say, "I want the professional grade version of Captain Black that doesn't have all of the preservatives and stuff," then they'll know what you mean and they'll be able to get it for you no matter what it's called locally. The main blend I smoke though is actually one that I have custom blended for me. I tend to like aromatic tobaccos. I tend to like ones that have sweeter notes in them, like different notes of fruit, like blackberry and cherry and um, blueberry and things like that. And some time ago, I found a German tobacco that was imported, and I hated the name. But the name was Devil's Holiday, but it had all of the right notes in it that I enjoyed, all the flavor and aroma notes. I didn't like it was a little dry. Even though it shipped over from Germany in like sealed you know, polyvinyl bags or something without any air. It's still, they just make their tobaccos drier over there sometimes than we do here in the US. So I would get that in California, but then when I moved here to Arkansas, turns out the company that makes it has a tax dispute with the state of Arkansas, and it is not available here. So I have there are a couple of tobacco shops I go to here locally. One of them is over in a town called Siloam Springs, which is very near. I'm in Fayetteville. Both Fayetteville and Siloam Springs are in the Ozarks. And I'll drive over to Siloam Springs, which is, it's like 45 minutes away. It's right over by the Oklahoma border. And there's a shop there called Ash and Ember, and they do custom pipe blends for individuals. And so I said, I'm looking for something that's like Devil's Holiday. But it can be sweeter and it can be moister. And they blended one really great. And since I was the person they were blending it for, I got to name it. It is now St. Michael's Holiday.
Oh, that's good.
And so they were blending it for me. Then they decided to release it generally to the public, and they tell me it's become a very popular blend. In fact, I had mentioned this because I do every year for Christmas. I do a live stream for people to hang out on Christmas Day, especially if they don't have anyone else to be with. We can come and hang out together, and I answer people's questions. And someone this year was asking about what kind of tobacco do I smoke, and so I mentioned St. Michael's Holiday and where I get it. And I was over there last week picking up some more, and like, here's a bag of it. But when I was picking it up, they were telling me, oh yeah, this has become a very popular blend. We've even been getting mail orders, or phone calls from people who want to order it and have it sent to them through the mail because they heard your Christmas live stream.
Well,
And
they'll be getting some more orders after that.
yeah,
Because the people St. Michael's holiday. So is that? Can you bring that bag back just
yeah,
a second? And
sure.
let's take a brief look at that. Is primarily black Cavendish? Is that what I'm seeing?
I would
Yeah,
suppose so. Yes,
yeah.
and with black cherry and various other fruit noted blends as part of it. They also, as part of blending this, they didn't just combine um, the um, the different tobaccos. They also impressed it with liquid flavor.
Uh,
And when you get it and you open it and you smell it, it has a really strong sweet note, that liquid flavor that they added and then pressed into the tobacco. I don't know all exactly how they do that, but that's what they tell me. That is very prominent.
so do what's the name of that shop again?
Ash and Ember.
All right, and do they have a website?
Yeah, they do. They're also on Facebook,
Okay, all right,
but
good.
it's Ash and Ember in Siloam Springs, Arkansas.
Now, so you have a local brick and mortar, fairly local. And how far is that from
Couple of
you?
them, several of them actually. Well, there's one here in town called Open Door,
Mhm.
which is a Christian tobacco shop.
And
That's hence the name Open Door. Behold, I set before you an open door. The idea is we want to get people and get them involved and come into the shop and not judge them, but share the gospel, and do whatever we can to serve people spiritually. And that's just, I don't know, that's 10 minutes from where I live. And I get the Captain Black equivalent there because I want to support both shops. So I get the
right.
Captain Black equivalent at Open Door, and I get St. Michael's Holiday at Ash and Ember, which is like 45 minutes from where I am. And there are a few other ones further north, like in Bentonville, which is where Walmart is based, and other places like that around.
Well, so you're fortunate. You're fortunate to have places where you can go to and actually buy it without having to order. Do you order tobacco online from different places as well, or you just basically go to the store and get it?
I, these days, I'm just going to the store to get it. I have ordered from smokingpipes.com. Like right when COVID began, I didn't, and there were all the lockdowns. I didn't know if we were going to, what that was going to do to businesses and my ability to go to them. So I placed a big tobacco order all at once
Mm.
at the beginning of the lockdowns. These days, I prefer going to the stores because I like to support them locally. I do order pipes, though, from smokingpipes.com because they have a large selection that fits what I like. Um, it makes it easy to get what I like. I tend to like, now I have numerous different types of pipes, like this straight one and so forth. I even have over, you can't see it from here, but over on my wall, I have an actual Navajo deer antler pipe.
My
Um,
goodness.
yeah, but and you're only seeing actually a small portion of my pipe collection. I actually have a lot more. But the I my preferred shape is the bent billiard, and in particular, I like the 606 shape, um, and the king size version. So I can go to smokingpipes.com and put in KS606 and see their whole selection of shapes I like. So it makes it easier to find the kind of shapes I like. I also have a few custom made ones that people have made for me, and I appreciate those too. But it's I mainly I will sometimes buy pipes from local shops, but I mainly go to them for the tobacco.
Right. Yeah, it's hard for local shops to maintain a large inventory of pipes these
Yeah,
days, simply because of the overhead that's involved. Because most people in local brick and mortar communities are not going to be buying a new pipe every week.
yeah.
But I have bought a great deal from Smoking Pipes myself. It is easy. You
Mhm.
tell their particular program what you want, and then you can go from there. But Jimmy, I have had so much fun with this conversation. This is just
Likewise.
outstanding.
Yeah.
And we're only touching the iceberg of things that you and I could talk about. But I think that your insight is going to be valuable to several different people. And I'm so thankful to have your friendship. I'm thankful for your work that you're doing with Catholic Answers. And for those of you, and I know there are several people who watch this channel are thinking about Catholicism. They're looking into the church. If you don't know the works of Jimmy Akin, you don't know the works of Catholic Answers, then that's a gold mine. There's so many different avenues, doors, like G.K. Chesterton said about the Catholic Church. It's a house with 1,000 doors. You can come
Mm.
in from several different areas. But I don't necessarily want to talk specifically about Catholicism today. Perhaps we'll be able to do that in a future video. But Jimmy, it's been a privilege and an honor, and I look forward to meeting you in person someday.
Sounds great. I look forward to it too. And thank you so much for having me today, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Alan Harrelson with the Pipe Cottage with Jimmy Akin, our guest today. Thank you for stopping by.